Okay, today we're in Joshua 6 and probably 7, and I'm really excited because Pastor's preaching on coveting, and chapter 7 is about coveting. So, in fact, he's going to use that as an example. So, it's great how God works. But chapter 6, it is finally time for their first battle in the new promised land. So let's see how that goes. And remember, we left off, and Joshua was meeting with Jesus. So Jesus hasn't left yet. So here's verse 1 and 2. I'll start.
Now Jericho was shut up inside and outside because of the people of Israel. None went out, and none came in. And the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand with its king and mighty men of valor."
Okay, notice how verse 1 starts with now. So you can put that in parentheses. It's just a break saying, by the way, while I'm talking to you, all the people in Jericho, they're shut up tight. And then the conversation picks up again with Jesus. Now, we've talked about how this is the best defended city in Canaan. Yet, they are hiding and they are terrified. Now, typically a city would keep its gates open all day so that merchants could come in and out. The people a lot of the houses were outside the city gates. You know, the farmers and things, they'd live outside the city gates so they could go in and out. But now, everybody's inside, shut up tight. And when it says shut, it means shut. It's an extreme word for shut. No one's coming in or out. So they're hunkering down, ready for a long siege. It's a good city for a siege because a river ran through it. And so they would be able to withstand a long siege. Now, 40 years earlier, it was the Israelites that were afraid of the walled cities of Canaan. Now the walled cities are afraid of the Israelites. They'd heard about the parting of the Red Sea. They knew how the Israelites had won battle after battle. And they're just really afraid. They don't know how the Israelites are going to come after them. Again, they're probably thinking siege. Even though Jericho had taken all the defensive measures they could, God says, none of that's going to help. Joshua, you are going to defeat this city. Well, he actually says, I've already given it to you. And once they defeat that city, they are going to have the confidence they need to defeat everything else. Come on in, Betty. Now Joshua is going to hear the battle plan, the craziest battle plan ever put in. He's going to hear it from the Lord. Verses 3 through 5.
I have a little side note.
Okay.
That last verse there in chapter 55, the place you're standing is holy. That's my offertory this morning. You're standing on holy ground.
Oh.
So just a little side
Pastor and I were just talking this morning. It's amazing how God works all this stuff out.
March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have all the people give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse, and the people will go in, every man straight in.
So basically, there were 2 ways to normally attack a walled city. You get over or under the wall, or you lay siege to it. This is not one of those ways. This is like way off. it makes no military sense at all. It all depends on God. No brilliant strategy here, no military might. It is all God. So they're to march around for 6 days. And it's about a half-mile march. So even though it's a lot of people, it's not going to take all day. It's a few-hour march. And then they go back to doing whatever they're going to do for the rest of the day. And I love it. The marching band is leading the parade. So it says it would take about 20 to 30 minutes to walk around it. And then the 7th day they're to walk around 7 times. So you have to wonder if the front of the line reached the back of the line before the back of the line got around the circle, because that's a lot of people. They probably marched in wide columns or something. Now, there's some that feel that probably not all the fighting men were in this circle, because, yeah, you can imagine hundreds of thousands and walking a half mile, what that would be. So if this plan worked, it had to be God. But we won't see the army of angels in this at all. Now, they're probably there, but we don't see them doing anything. The people had to do what they had to do. They had to participate. Now, God could have just blown those walls down. They didn't have to do all this stuff, but God wanted them to. He wanted them to participate. And it says the walls will, my version says the walls will fall flat. Collapse, they are going to fall down. They're not going to fall out or in, they're going to fall down. So when it says the people will go up, when all those walls fall down, they're going to have to climb up over the walls. So that's what it's talking about when it says they have to go up. Now remember, so far this is Jesus telling Joshua what's going to happen. Now Joshua has to go tell the people. And I could imagine what their reaction is going to be. You're like, what? We're ready to fight. So verse 6 and 7 is where they are going to tell the people. And Bonnie, you walked in right at the right time.
Right.
That's you.
So Joshua sent a man and called the priests and said to them, "Take up the ark of the covenant of the Lord and have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it." And he ordered the army, "Advance, march around the city with an armed guard going ahead of the ark of the Lord."
Okay, this is the first time they are going to carry the ark into battle with them, but it won't be the last. But is this even a battle? Or is it just a declaration of God's power over Jericho? This march reveals to Israel that they need to trust God and only trust God, even when it makes no sense at all. Put him first, exalt him.
Just remind me when we also, I think in Hebrew says, bring your sacrifices of praise. So
Yeah.
even in difficult times, when we praise God, and I experience that, it helps inside.
Yeah. So this reveals that they need to trust God. It reveals to the priests that this is not a normal battle. This ark is going to play an important role in the battle. And it reveals to Jericho that the people of Israel aren't afraid. They're going to run or walk circles around you, literally. So Joshua had to talk to the priests, let them know what's going on. And then the people, because this was nowhere near normal, he had to get their buy-in. But we don't see anyone arguing and saying, "What are you thinking?"
No.
Claiming they aren't going to participate, even though this is completely insane. So now it's time to actually get it done. And this is, Vicky, sorry, lot, 8 through 14.
8 through 14, okay. So it was when Joshua had spoken to the people that the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horn before the Lord advanced and blew the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. The armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard came after the ark, while the priests continued blowing the trumpets. Now Joshua had commanded the people, saying, "You shall not shout or make any noise with your voice, nor shall a word proceed from your mouth, out of your mouth, until the day I say to you, shout, then you shall shout." So they had the ark of the Lord circle the city, going around it once. Then they came into the camp and lodged in the camp. And Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. Then 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord went on continually and blew with the trumpets. And the armed men went before them, but the rear guard came after the ark of the Lord, while the priests continued blowing the trumpets. And the second day they marched around the city once and returned to camp. So they did 6 days.
Okay, so they are doing everything that God told Joshua to do. They're being the obedient people they need to be. Can you imagine what the people of Jericho are thinking? You can bet they're watching. What is this craziness? I mean, why aren't they attacking? Do you think they're probably jeering and taunting them, yelling from the walls? Or one theologian said he thought maybe God had them march around for 6 days to give Jericho that much more time to repent. Doesn't say that here, but it would be a good explanation. But they don't. And while they're marching around, were the Israelites possibly susceptible to attack? Could the people of Jericho have come out and attacked?
It could have been on top of the coffin.
Yeah, shooting arrows or whatever they had at the time. Nope, they don't do anything. They're still afraid. They're afraid to do it.
He's probably so busy watching them, man.
Yeah.
And isn't this interesting? It says, "You shall not shout or make your voice heard, neither shall any word go out of your mouth." Can you imagine all those people walking around
Saying nothing?
saying nothing? I mean,
Not
it
even
must have
saying,
been all men, no
not-
women.
not even saying, "Fred, don't you think this is crazy?" None of that. No talking at
They
all.
must have not had any women in the group.
Yeah. Yeah. So the only sound is the sound of the trumpet. And I'm sure a lot of footprints.
Yeah.
Footsteps. Stomp, stomp, stomp. Yeah, because
Yeah,
men
because
don't
were
walk
they
quiet.
marching like you think of marching, or were they just walking?
Strolling. So they marched.
Yeah. So then
Yeah.
they're
Yeah, and it's a half-mile march, so it's not a long march,
Just a lot of people.
but a lot of people. Even if it's just the fighting men, it's still a lot of people. So some say that the men that were in the front of the group were Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, because they were supposed to be the Joshua had told them, you're going to be our point group. So they think maybe they were at the front of the march. So as they circle day 1, nothing happens. Day 2, nothing happens. 3, 4, 5, 6, they don't see anything happening, but they still obey. And then they go back to the camp and each day and do what they normally do. But it also gave Israel a great look at those impressive walls. I mean, they 6 days of walking around, they saw those walls 360. So they knew where everything was. Not that it was going to stay there, but they knew where everything was. Now, it could have been really discouraging because they were massive walls. But it also will show them that you can't do this without God. You need God because you're not getting over those walls. So verse 15 and 16.
Early on the seventh day, they started at dawn and marched around the city 7 times in the same way. That was the only day they marched around the city 7 times. After the 7th time, the priests blew the trumpets, and Joshua said to the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city."
Day 7, the big day. Now, think about it. They've marched around for 7 days. That means one of those days was the Sabbath day. We don't know what day. Of course, the rabbis think it was this day, but it doesn't say. But later, the rabbis make a big deal about not doing work. Well, they were marching on the Sabbath. So at the end, no more quiet. They shout as loud as they can. And the word for shout here has a double meaning. It means a war cry, but also a cry of praise. It's kind of unique to the Hebrews.
And it doesn't tell us what they shouted.
Nope. Doesn't tell us.
What was the word, did they shout?
Did they just
Hallelujah,
scream or? Yeah.
So originally, or at the beginning of this chapter, the Lord told Joshua the battle was already won.
Mm-hmm.
Did he tell the people, do you think?
It doesn't say he did, but I'm sure
Because that
he
makes
must
it,
have.
that would make a big difference in how that they wouldn't be afraid to walk around.
Yeah. Yeah. And it would kind of quiet their fears and let them know that there's a purpose to all this walking around. Just got to trust God. But yeah, they give out this, I don't know if it was like a whoop, they're like guys yelling, or doesn't say what they said. So, but they yell. Now this is another 17 through 19 is another area where it's kind of like stuck in the middle of things. It's like, oh, by the way. So verse 17 through 19.
Lost my place.
Oh.
But the city and everything in it was set apart to the Lord for destruction. Only Rahab the prostitute and everyone with her in the house will live, because she hid the men we sent. But keep yourselves from the things set apart, or you will be set apart for destruction. If you take any of those things, you will set apart the camp of Israel for destruction and bring disaster on it. For all the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron are dedicated to the Lord and must go into the Lord's treasure.
Okay, so it's not like they stopped and Joshua gave them instructions, because they were yelling and everything. So this must have been before. So like by the way, Joshua told his guys this too. Now, notice how many times it says this is stuff that's dedicated to God. Destroy it. Destroy it all. Except Rahab, and the silver and gold and every vessel of bronze and iron are to become part of the treasury for God. So everything was supposed to be destroyed. But Joshua honors the agreement with Rahab. And again, everything else destroyed but some of the precious metals for the treasury. So my version uses the word devoted a lot. And that word in Hebrew is herem, H-E-R-E-M. It means devoted to God for destruction. So every time you see the word destruction or accursed or devoted, it's that herem word. Now, it sounds like the word harem, the Arabian word for the women of a sheik, because those women are set apart. So they're related words. They're set apart for their master. So related words. But this is set apart and destroyed for God. Now, the judgment against Jericho isn't because they're just in the way of the Israelites and the Israelites need to conquer the city. Jericho was an evil city. They were in total rebellion against God, and they had satanic practices. God had held his judgment back for such a long time, but now it's time for that judgment. They had not repented. So everyone was to be destroyed. So pretty clear instructions here, right?
Just like the Lord's doing today. He's holding back all of his judgment.
Yep. So instructions: keep your hands off everything in Jericho, destroy everything but some of the valuables, and those belong to God. So pretty clear. Yeah, so we'll see that in the next chapter. So back to the battle, verse 20 and 21.
When the trumpet sounded, the people shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the people gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So every man charged straight in, and they took the city. They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys.
Okay, so first time we hear the people's voice, and it's the soldiers, and it's a shout, and then again, mine says the walls fell flat or collapsed, and that's the Battle of Jericho. The walls fell down. I mean, all the preparation and everything, all the walking around is down. The walls fell flat. That's the culmination. The preparation takes so much more time than the actual action. A lot of people come up with natural causes for these walls to fall down. Earthquakes, vibrations from all the shouting. Don't think so. Earthquakes, the walls would fall outer end. They don't fall down. If you've ever been in a major earthquake, the most unsafe place to be is right there by the walls outside, because the walls are going to fall. They're not going to fall that way. They're going to fall that way. So no, not earthquakes. Probably not their shouting. God may have maybe God amplified it, but it wasn't a natural thing. It says the foundation fell first. It fell flat down. Hebrews 11:30 says they fell by faith. It says by faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they had been encircled for 7 days. Now, about 1930, an archaeologist found a city that seemed like it was Jericho, whose walls had fallen down. They haven't been able to absolutely prove it is, but they think it is. Its walls were down and everything had been burned. The problem is when a city collapses, eventually they build another city on top and another city on top. So you have to get way down. So the city is now open for attack. And the Canaanites did not expect this at all. You can imagine how many died when the walls collapsed. But
Especially
anyone,
the ones up on top.
yeah,
They wouldn't have it.
anybody that didn't die that way, the Israelites went in and killed them all of them, the babies too. And it's hard for our society to wrap our heads around killing all the babies too. But these were a completely evil people. And when you leave the babies alive, their society, it is required by their culture that they seek revenge. So they all had to go.
And what babies are still being killed.
They are.
Saddens me.
This
Yeah.
is a wonderful example where Isaiah says God's ways are not man's ways.
Yeah.
We can look today and see what America's or the world's concept of what Israel wants to do. They say we're going to destroy Hamas. Period. And they said, no, let's have a ceasefire.
Yeah.
No, let's do this. No, let's do that.
That's helping.
But God's ways are not man's ways.
Yeah.
And another thing about killing all of the children, they showed a little boy, I think he was 6 years old, on the news the other night, that was in Hamas, raised by a Hamas, a parent that was so against the Jews, and they said to the little boy, tell us what you think about the Jews. And this little 6-year-old boy has already been taught the Jews are dirty, the Jews are nasty, the Jews are to be killed, the Jews... The 6-year-old child was projecting everything that he had been taught against the Jews. So yeah, you can understand why they killed the children.
Yeah.
This seems like they didn't hide anything back or keep anything back. Where so many times when they were told to destroy everything,
Yeah.
they kept.
Oh, wait.
couldn't do
We're
it.
not chapter
Oh, wait.
7 yet.
Yeah.
For AI.
Oh, darn it! Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Well, it looked like they.
99.9% of them, yes.
They had a few special cases.
They have one special case.
Yeah,
but-
right.
Yeah.
And they
yes.
haven't passed that.
Yeah. We'll
Rahab and her family.
we'll get to that
I
one.
should have read it.
Yeah. Okay. And God had told Abraham, because these are part of the Amorite people, God had told Abraham back in Genesis 15:16 that the Amorites would be destroyed. Well, so now it's happening. The Amorites are getting destroyed. And God is using Israel to bring judgment on them.
You know, Rahab's house was on top of the wall, we figured. You know, when we talked about it a couple weeks ago. And then the walls fell flat. You know, did her section not fall? or did
So we'll
hers
talk
just-
about that in this next section, because
Well-
we're talking about Rahab in this next
Yeah.
section. So
But just, you know,
Seems like she would have been crushed.
yeah, so there's things about that. But let's read about Rahab in verses, Betty, verses 22 through 25.
Joshua said to the two, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Joshua said to the two men who had spied out the land, go into the harlot's house and bring the woman and all she has out of there, as you have sworn to her. So the young men who were spies went in and brought out Rahab and her father and her mother and her brothers and all she had. They also brought out all her relatives and placed them outside the camp of Israel. They burned the city with fire and all that was in it. Only the silver and gold, the articles of bronze and iron, they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. However, Rahab the harlot and her father's household and all she had, Joshua spared. and she has lived in the midst of Israel to this day. For she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho.
So yeah, that brings the question of, okay, her house was in the wall. How could she survive that?
Well, it could have been they sent those men out before the wall fell.
Possibly, but that city was shut up tight. Back when it said shut up, it meant shut up. No one was getting in. Now, that archaeologist that found what might be Jericho, on the very north wall, there's a section that stood. So they think that could have been Rahab's house. And remember, when the spies were there, Rahab said, run to the mountains to the north. If her house was on the north, that made it like that much closer. So maybe that's it. We aren't told how.
Well, my definition says they went in.
Well, if her house stood, they had something to go into.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says mine says go into the prostitute's house and bring out from there the woman and all her.
That's what mine says.
Yeah, and wouldn't that be like God to have that kind of miracle? Everything falls except the one one little section for Rahab's house. But it just doesn't say. It's not likely they went in before, because that city was so shut up that no one was going in or out. So somehow her house stood so that they could bring her out. Whatever it was, God protected her.
Didn't the spies go out?
They
The
went out
side of the wall is how the spies got out.
They got out, but that was when the city was not shut down tight. You can imagine they are not letting anyone near that city
They were
while the walls
escaping.
were up.
They were escaping then.
Yeah, they were escaping at that point, but there was no one they were going to let anywhere near those walls. You can bet they had soldiers surrounding those walls on the top, so there was no sneaking in that city. So it had to be some kind of miracle.
Oh yeah, it was a miracle.
And they were rescued, all the people that she kept in her house.
Now, the Lord was already there when they were marching, so of course he was there to save Rahab.
Yeah.
And it says she lived in Israel to this day because she hid the messengers. No, she lived because she had faith. And that faith is why she hid the messengers.
Amen.
So it was her faith that saved her. She showed her faith by an action.
Yes.
All Jericho had heard about God, but she's the only one that responded. So it says she and her family were put outside the camp. They were put into a kind of quarantine. The camp of Israel was considered holy, and it was clean. Unclean people were not allowed in. So they would have had to go through a passage of time and observance of rituals. The guys probably would have had to get circumcised, everything else before they were brought into the congregation, and then they were welcomed in.
Well, Hebrews 11:31 says, by faith Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient, because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies.
Yeah.
So she's listed in the Hall of Faith.
Yeah.
By faith.
Yeah. And when it says to this day, it means at the point that Joshua is writing this book. But she becomes part of their society, and we will see her. She has pretty important
She's in the lineage of Jesus.
generations that follow her. Yeah. Including Jesus. She's no longer a Canaanite. She's an Israelite. Okay, and then Joshua has something interesting to say in verses 26 and 27.
Curse on Jericho. At that time Joshua pronounced this solemn oath. Cursed before the Lord is the man who undertakes to rebuild this city, Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn son, he will lay its foundations. At the cost of his youngest will he set up its gates. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land.
Okay, so he declares a special curse. Don't build on top of the ruins here. This is a cursed area. Later in 1 Kings 16, we're going to see a man named Hiel. He rebuilds on Jericho. And his oldest and his youngest sons die. Okay, so this is the end of the story of Jericho. Joshua's fame goes throughout the land. You know, the first big battle, that's such an important thing. So you can imagine how terrified Canaan is now. It also provides a chance for repentance for all those Canaanites and all the ites that are around.
So,
but we don't see
this day, nothing is built there.
Oh, yeah, since then, they've built over and over and over on top of there. That's why when they found these ruins, they had to, like a lot of ancient ruins, you find them underneath other ruins. So a leader's first battle was so important. It built your reputation. So his reputation is great right now. You can imagine he has a great and powerful reputation right now. But the first word of Joshua 7, but, okay, verse 1.
But the Israelites were unfaithful in regard to the devoted things. Achan, son of Camri, the son of Zamri, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of them, so the Lord's anger burned against Israel. So the language here is blunt, it's emphatic, it gives a clue that there is something bad going to happen. We ended the last chapter with how famous Joshua was becoming. This, but it's an intentional and big contrast. And the sin that was committed, it was not an accidental sin. Remember how they were told, don't take anything. Nothing, because it is cursed. But they act unfaithfully. It says they, but it's really one person that does it. He broke faith. And the idea is the same as someone committing adultery. You broke a relationship. It's a betrayal of trust. God trusted them not to do that. He was emphatic. I mean, how many times did he say, destroy this stuff, destroy this stuff, destroy this stuff? Now, normally after a battle, the soldiers were rewarded with the loot.
Yeah.
They were able to take whatever they found, normally. But not these. These are the first fruits, the first battle. They are to be given to God, to honor God. God's the only one that could take anything from this perverse group and make it holy. So, God got so angry. It's that red nose anger. Super angry. Now, Israel could not be defeated by the Canaanites, but they sure could defeat themselves. How many times do we defeat ourselves in our lives? Notice it is just one man who does this, but God is angry with the people.
Well, my note says it's because there was a covenant relationship Israel had, and if one person broke it, the whole community's responsible.
Yeah. This is called the concept of corporality. It means like Adam sinned, we all sinned. That's corporality. As one animal is sacrificed, all humans are forgiven. Corporality. As Jesus died, he gave himself to all corporality. So this is another example of corporality. One man's sin affects everyone. It's still true today. You have sin in the church, and it affects everyone. So Achan, his name means trouble. Isn't that such an appropriate name?
Just like AI, artificial intelligence.
Yeah. Well, I decided to look up how do you say it, and it's actually more of a Mexican interpretation. Ay. It's A-E, rather than AI. I-E.
Yeah, it's also, it sounded like what he took was fairly insignificant. I mean, it wasn't like something he would covet or want to think, he didn't.
Well, he will.
Well, and
Well, it's defiance.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and with all those people there,
He
surely
couldn't take
somebody
a lot.
saw him taking it and could have said, "Hey,
Yeah.
you're not to do that." So that's why it was the sin of the whole nation.
Yeah. So, and we even get his lineage here, and that's going to be important later. He's the son of Carmi, grandson of Zabdi, great-grandson of Zerah. There's more generations in between there, because Zerah from the tribe of Judah. Zerah was the son of Judah and Tamar. Remember, Tamar was Judah's daughter-in-law, and she had to trick him into sleeping with her because he wouldn't remarry her to one of her sons. So this is the child of that relationship. So this relationship started out as sin.
It's grandson, great grandson.
Great, yeah. There's more generations in this, because this wouldn't fit. I mean, we're more than 400 years back. So, but we're going to see this come into play. Okay, so verse 2 and 3. And you read last, right? Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Beth-aven, east of Bethel, and said to them, "Go up and spy out the land." And the men went up and spied out Ai. And they returned to Joshua and said to him, "Do not have all the people go up, but let about 2,000 or 3,000 men go up and attack Ai. Do not make the whole people toil up there, for they are few." So when Joshua says, when they say go up, and then the spies say, "Don't make everybody toil up there," they mean up, because it's a pretty steep climb from where they are. It rises about 3,400 feet from where they're at.
And if they're at Jericho, it's about 750 feet below sea level.
Yeah, so it means a climb. So when it says don't make them go up there, it's save them. Don't make people have to climb that. Now, is this a response of faith or self-confidence? It doesn't matter, because God didn't tell them to do that. They were in a really tough spiritual time right now, because right after a great spiritual victory, you can get overconfident. And you can think, I can do this on my own.
Yeah, that's
Maybe they were thinking, well, we're the ones that won this thing. And it wouldn't matter if they took 100,000 men. They were in disobedience. God didn't say send spies out there. And Joshua, you don't see him going to God to ask about this. Mm-hmm. Maybe he thought it was just too small of an issue to bother God with.
Maybe he put him on the shelf for a while.
Yeah.
Duh.
Yeah. But how many times do we think, we can take care of it on our own, and we don't ask God about it? Because we think, God, I shouldn't be bothering God about this. And he's saying, bother me, bother me. This is Joshua's first really big mess up. God didn't say to send spies. God didn't say anything about Now it's about 10 to 12 miles from Jericho, and it's got a population of 12,000, which we would think is pretty big, but it's small compared to Jericho, and doesn't have them significant walls. And, but it would be a really hard march. Now, A means heap of ruins. Isn't it amazing how these names just like, why would you name your city Heap of Ruins? But maybe it got renamed later, I don't know. Now, it's still an important city because it helped guard the north-south route that the caravans used through Canaan. And it was the only way for armies to march north and south. So they wanted the city. It was also the second place that Abraham camped when he came to Canaan. So they really need it's hard for me to remember to say it that way. I've always heard AI, but A. Or I guess in Spanish, ay. Yeah, I don't know. Verse 4 and 5.
So about 3,000 men went up there from the people, and they fled before the men of Ai. And the men of Ai killed about 36 of their men, and chased them before the gate as far as Shebran, and struck them at the descent. And the hearts of the people melted and became as water.
Where's the ark?
Well, it's still in the camp, I guess. Huh?
So they lose. Embarrassed. They lose 36 men, which is, it seems insignificant, but it isn't. How many were killed at Jericho?
None.
It should have been a piece of cake. It's a disaster for Israel. It puts a big dent in their reputation. It shows they can be defeated. It'll give all those ites a little confidence. So it says they chased them to Shebarim. We don't know where that is. It might mean that they were chased all the way almost to the Israelite camp, and then the people, they saw the Israelites and said, whoop, we better turn around. We don't know. And now whose hearts are melting? The Israelites. How many times did God say, be strong and courageous? And now their hearts are melting because they didn't do what God said. But there's another reason. Let's look at verse 6 through 9.
Then
Yeah.
Joshua tore his clothes and fell face down to the ground before the ark of the Lord, remaining there till evening. The elders of Israel did the same and sprinkled dust on their heads. And Joshua said, Ah, sovereign Lord, why did you ever bring this people across the Jordan to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us? If only we had been content to stay on the other side of the Jordan. Oh Lord, what can I say? Now that Israel has been routed by its enemies, the Canaanites and the other people of the country will hear about this, and they'll surround us and wipe out our name from the earth. What then will you do for your great name? Oh, great name.
So, doesn't this just sound like them while they were wandering in the wilderness? We would have been better off if you hadn't done this to us.
Go back.
You didn't do that to them. And now Joshua turns to God. Too little, too late. And he's doing his nation's, the mourning customs and tearing his clothes and everything else. It's the second time we see Joshua on his face. The first time was in humility. Now it's in humiliation. They knew there was a reason for their defeat, and they blamed God. Why did you do this to me? To us.
Did Joshua know about Achan?
Did Joshua know? No, not at this point.
No,
Yeah.
that's why.
And he makes it sound like his biggest concern was bringing glory to God's name.
Yeah.
But is it?
It's like,
Is he more
oh,
concerned
we
about being?
messed up.
Is he more concerned about being a laughing stock?
Yeah.
He's worried about what it'll do to his reputation.
Right. Yeah.
So verse 10 and 11, God's response.
The Lord said to Joshua, stand up, what are you doing down on your face? Israel has sinned, they have violated my covenant, which I commanded them to keep. They have taken some of the devoted things, they have stolen, they have lied, they have put them with their own possessions.
So Joshua called on God, and God showed up. Just not the way Joshua thought it would be. He says, get up off your face. And the word he's using is, it means falling on his face over and over again. So he must have been like genuflecting, and he's saying, you're praying at the wrong time. You should have prayed before. Now you got sin to deal with. God says, I haven't failed you, you failed me. They had sinned, transgressed, taken, stolen, lied, deceived. Joshua's going, what? What? When did we do this? He's got to be in pretty big shock. Sin was blocking their relationship with God. And the sin belonged to Israel, not just one man. They were declared guilty. And because of their guilt, 36 men were dead. All for the sin of this one man. Now, we already know what the sin was. Someone took things from Jericho that were devoted to God. So verse 12 and 13.
Therefore the children of Israel could not stand before their enemies, but turned their backs before their enemies, because they have become doomed to destruction. Neither will I be with you anymore, unless you destroy the cursed from among you. Now get up, sanctify the people, and say, sanctify yourselves for tomorrow, because thus says the Lord, God of Israel, there is an accursed thing in your midst. O Israel, you cannot stand before your enemies until you take away the accursed thing from among you.
Yeah.
As long as those things were in the camp, God was not. What a scary thing. Separation from God. That's what sin does. It separates us from God. No obedience, no blessings. Now, luckily, we're on the other side of the cross.
But I don't think so. That is easier.
Yeah, our relationship with God is established based on Jesus Christ and not what we do. But we still sin, and that hinders our relationship. It doesn't end it, but it makes it where it's not as full as it should be. And that's an important thing. And again, we see here the sin affects everybody. Now, it doesn't mean that every time a difficult thing comes along, it's the result of sin. But when you're facing a tough time, it doesn't hurt to ask God, is there something that I need to get right in my life?
Right.
The next part is going to be about how to judge the sin, but we're going to run out of time, and I'm kind of disappointed because that is what the pastor's preaching on this week. He is preaching on coveting. Yeah.
7:14 we stop.
And that is the cause behind everything that's going on. Someone coveted. Well, we already know it was Achan because it said that in the first verse. So we will pick up, keep track of what the pastor says, because that's next week's lesson. So, not that you ever don't pay attention. Okay, so I'm going to shut